Hey rice fans, welcome to another episode of Rice and Advice. I'm Dr. Jarrod Hardke, Rice Extension Agronomist for the University of Arkansas System, Division of Agriculture. Today we're out having a look at some fields that are displaying symptoms consistent with delayed phytotoxicity syndrome. This has to do with the inability of the rice plant to metabolize and really withstand what are normally rice-safe herbicides. And so that we're getting sick rice from that, and we're going to go have a closer look at some of these plants, what's going on in certain areas of the field, and also what we can do to kind of speed things along to recovery and make sure that we still make a good crop even in those areas. Let's go take a closer look. Here we are having a closer look at an affected area displaying symptoms consistent with delayed phytotoxicity syndrome, or DPS. If you get down and have some closer looks at the plants themselves, you can pick out some of the malformation of the lower stems and tillers. You can see this one in particular. We'll go ahead and pull it up to have a closer look. Good root system. The plant's otherwise doing pretty well. But again, starting to get sickly. One of the most common symptoms we usually refer to is fish hooking of tillers. You can kind of see how some of these are starting to get again, kind of a bowed shape. This one's not too severe in that regard, but if you feel of it, it's going to be very, very rigid and brittle. And if it gets far enough along in progression, if you're walking and you step on these plants, you'll notice that they kind of have a crunchy, rigid feel to them, and these very much do. You can see some of the leaves beginning to be rolled a lot more, not wanting to fully open. These lower tillers being very spiky and rolled. Again, very, very majorly affected. This is certainly a thinner area here, which is probably not due to the DPS itself, but maybe had some other injury going on early. And then you get a lot of herbicide activity here with very few number of total plants actually out here. And so that's going to have the potential to increase us seeing this kind of injury. Again, here's another small plant. You can see a little bit more of that this, again, not quite a true fish hook. It's a little bit longer tiller, but you can see it starting to turn and bow at a little bit of an angle. Those types of symptoms are going on. And again, some more scattered around across this area, give it kind of a patchy, a little bit of a mangy look. So typically the first question we get, of course, whenever we encounter this type of situation in field condition is, what do I do about it? Well, the first thing is, if it's a milder situation, very small area of the field, or at least the patches don't account for a very large percentage of the field, then the idea is going to be that we're just going to ease that water back, maybe just stop pumping, let the heat and sunlight naturally take its course, and obviously the plant use of the water as well, and go ahead and just start letting that flood level settle back down. Usually that's going to be enough, just removing that stress of a deeper flood off of that rice, enough to help it recover and respond and get out of this situation. However, in some other situations where it's suddenly a larger percentage of the field, a lot more injury, a lot more severe, we're absolutely going to have to completely remove that flood and really dry up the field in order to get oxygen in there and get these plants to fully recover and respond. Should we be forced to do that, depending on the timing and a lot of other factors involved, we may or may not need to apply some supplemental nitrogen in those scenarios. That's very much going to be a situational thing, kind of where we are in growth stage timing, how long since nitrogen went out, how much we have to dry it up. All those are going to be factors, but really that's the answer, is at least lowering the flood to potentially completely removing it, depending on the exact situation that we're dealing with. So one understandably frequent question is, what exactly is going on to cause DPS, delayed phytotoxicity syndrome? Sometimes people call it delayed phytotoxic shock. It's all really the same condition. Ultimately what's going on, and this was really outlined by Dr. Don Groth at Louisiana State University in the early 2000s, but essentially typically rice-safe herbicides such as Bolero, Facet, Propanil, and some others essentially all have a part of their chemical structure known as a chlorinated benzene ring. Most of the time we spray these herbicides, no real problem. You don't really see any injury from it. We're all good, but under certain conditions, actually typically once we go to flood for a little while and we reach anaerobic conditions, no more oxygen there in the soil, there are anaerobic fungi which have a tendency to dechlorinate that benzene ring. So they basically cleave off the chlorine, and in that form that compound is then left, it's now toxic to the rice. And so as it continues to take up that herbicide in its new form, you start to get this injury. And the only way to alleviate the problem is, again, to drop the water down, and in severe cases completely remove the flood and reoxygenate some of the soil so that we can put a stop to that reaction, allow plants to grow normally. That direct oxygen is, again, going to alleviate the anaerobic condition. We'll go back to aerobic. Plus, direct oxygen to rice roots is also going to spur on some more of their growth and get them moving. Again, that'll hopefully help speed overall recovery. But again, Dr. Growth found that areas with higher organic matter definitely had a tendency to be worse in terms of DPS tendency. So areas where we may have rice behind rice, or again in some kind of rotation where there's a lot of residue decaying situation like that, we're always going to see a lot more severe injury from DPS in those environments. So something to consider if you're seeing some of those issues, that we may have to change that up just a little bit from a rotational standpoint and move out of there. The thing about 2020 and how wet that it has been probably has a lot to do with just really how fast a lot of these fields are going anaerobic once we try to put the water to them. And that may again be driving some of the increased injury we're seeing this year. Add in the fact that with the conditions, a lot of our residual herbicides, again, all the ones I just mentioned, Facet, Bolero, those types of things, really been active for a very long time this year in a way that's helped us, but it does seem now to be hurting us just a little bit more. And that may be where some of this increased activity is happening and working on the rice just a little bit more. There we have just kind of a general rundown of what's going on with delayed phytotoxicity syndrome. Again, seeing quite a bit of it around this year. If you see it, go back through the management plan of trying to back it down. The worse the area, larger area, more of the field affected, you may have to go to more of a dried up situation. No automatic urea applications, just going to be situational there. But otherwise, if you have further questions, feel free to give us a call. Send some pictures just to verify and confirm, or you just want to visit about it, some further details. That's what we're here for. See you next time on Rice and Advice.